this is a member-led event. This was something that Buck just decided that was value that he could contribute to all of you. And so if you have ideas for those things, like, we are all ears. And with that, Buck is, has been a Hampton member, what, now 2 years? They're coming up on year 3 with your core group. And also an incredibly successful entrepreneur in his own right, runs a beautiful chain of boutique hotels across the US, and is an expert in AI for branding and creative.
Okay, raise your hand if this has ever happened to you. You go to make some asset, like a social ad or something, you put in a prompt, like, make this ad, my branding is this is what I want, and it comes out shitty. And then you give up on AI and you circle back like a month later and try it again, and similar things happen. Anyone? Good amount of people? Okay, great. Next slide. So I reached out to a lot of people asking what they wanted to hear in this event. Truth is, I already kind of knew what I wanted to talk about, but I just wanted to see what people said. And a lot of people said a lot on prompts and tools. And while we will get to that a little bit at the end, you can go to the next slide. What I've learned, and I would not say I'm an expert, but about 4 months ago now, I really dove in on AI. I've had a couple of hotels coming online, and I'll get to my story and role in a little bit. I do all the branding on my own properties, and I just started playing with it and really going deep on it. And the one thing I've learned is that more important than the prompting and the tools, and really makes all of that somewhat obsolete or just not important, is having a creative base and a set of creative guidelines similar to a brand guideline, but formatted specifically for AI and created with that in mind. So you can go to the next. This is what's allowed me to, this is one of my most recent properties. This background image was generated with AI. You can go to the next. It's helping me create like website mockups as well as like fully clickable technical prototypes. That's a big theme of this presentation. AI has not fully replaced a lot of the production I do, but it gets it like 80% of the way there. And then just figuring out the last 20% becomes much easier. Social assets, that image in the background is AI. This sketch right there is AI. You can go to the next. Banner ad here, computers AI generated. Go to the next. This whole thing, including the text and logo, is AI generated. And then now, recently, full brands front to back, color, typeface, logos, iconography, social assets, website, AI all the way through. So a couple people said some stuff that aligned with what I did want to talk about, which is, someone said framework for building out creative vision, how that translates to the rest of the team, execution of assets based on art direction. The other thing was that getting 75% of the way there, and then understanding that, at least for now, that final 20–25%, it's best, I think, to just use designers, and the cost is really reduced. And then the last thing, which we'll touch on at the end, is that this introduced a really interesting problem. Once you start to get good at this, it's hard to offload it. There's not many people who can do it. So I'll touch on that a little bit at the end. You can go to the next. So I'm going to go through a little bit on my background and then the story of how I got into this, because I think it will shed a lot of light on why I go about things the way I do, which I think is important. And then we'll get into that formulation of the creative guidelines, that base. And then at the end, we'll touch on prompts, tools, and workflow. But hopefully you'll see that is a much smaller part of the process if you do that upfront bit first. So about me, I'm a hotel developer and primarily serve like the main role on my projects besides concepting them and capitalizing them, carrying them through as the creative director. But I actually started in investment management at JP Morgan and BlackRock. I'm not trained in any sort of like visual medium. I did study creative writing, which comes in when we get to a lot of this is like text-based and human language based, but not visually trained, not a graphic designer by any means. A little bit of a backstory. So when I was a kid, I liked to build. I built a tiny house in my backyard. I took a year off after high school. I biked from Chicago to LA with a friend. And then after college, I graduated in the middle of COVID. I bought a camper and I was driving around the Western US. You go to the next. And I had an idea essentially for a van life campground. And I started working on it. And while I was working at BlackRock, eventually left. I was working with a venture capital fund, Aligned Ventures, and pitched them on that concept. And over the next couple of years, it changed a lot, but this is now my Oxedo Sedona project. It's like more of a boutique nature retreat. that is how I got into my company now, which is human capital, and that's what we do. So new concepts, bring them to market, capitalize them, and then carry them through the development, opening, and launch. These are the areas that I focus on personally with my team: concept, creative direction, design, brand, digital activation, and launch. This is a hotel. This is one of my more recent. It opened in December. It's in New Orleans. So you can see this is pretty much the scope of what we work on. So we did not design this one. We hired an amazing firm here, so I can't take credit for that, but creative direction, concept, and then all the way through all the implementations. You can go to the next. This is my most recent one. This is opening in like 2 weeks, kind of soft open right now. And actually, this is a client project, and the client is in Hampton, Sieva Kozinski, if anyone here knows him. Go to the next. I also do a lot of my personal brand, mainly on Instagram and TikTok. Use a lot of AI there. And then the next, over the last few years, I've developed a software called DealPage. It's web page pitch decks for real estate developers. Use AI a lot there, and we'll get into that with all that down there, AI. So the genesis story on how I found my way into this and what I'm going to show you. So in my brands, I was explaining this one before, I like to make a lot of unique assets, illustrations, and things, and all my brands are based on stories. So like the Hotel Perle, it's named after this guy, Perle Thomas, who designed the streetcars that pass in front of our building. And so I try to do things like in just graphic elements in our overall theme, pull through themes like the grid nature of the engineering plans coming into the website, the sketches of the floor plans, kind of like an engineering sketch. And AI came into the picture on Petty Ranch Inn, like I said, probably in about March, because I had all that backing, that story. I had a lot of research on the market, and we had sort of a concept pulled together. And we found a good, overall, that was the creative direction. We found an initial art direction, which is essentially to carry this forward in the form of this theme of communication over the ages. And I started to work on this, and we had some assets that we had found. If you go to the next, I realized I was going to have to make a lot of assets on this project. We didn't have a photographer out there. I was trying to get the placeholder site up. And somebody was like, oh, go try Revue. It's this new tool that just came out. Make some assets. So I started doing that. You go back. You can see this is my first ever image generated on AI. That's like a blank white space over there because that's the end of my account. And I made this background image for the hero. I made this stamp that's kind of hidden that I ended up using. But then when I kept trying it, the consistency just wasn't there. So again, I kind of gave up on it and put it to the side. If you go again. But when I was getting into the graphic elements, sort of that idea of engineering plans, you got the grid, you got the sketches, I couldn't figure out that thematic thing on this hotel. And I don't know why, but I was like, okay, I'm just gonna go talk to AI. I use AI a lot when I'm writing investment presentations and investor updates. So I just started talking to it like a human, and as you can see, I kind of explained what I just explained to you guys about the engineering, sketches, so kind of high level, and I wasn't trying to work towards generating anything, but just trying to get my thoughts more refined. And I carried that all the way through, and it started to give me ideas. Go to the next. And what really started to impress me is I sort of pulled it up to the role of an art director and talking with me at a high strategic level, not even getting into it all, how is this visually going to come through, besides thematic, general descriptors. And I saw it came up with this idea of a ranch journal / diary. And you can go to the next. I'll spare you the long details, but I ended up bringing this back to my team. We sort of workshopped it a bit more, and the concept for this brand became the idea of a petty family, or a family archives. We named the hotel after the guy who founded the town. You can go to the next. And the idea that kind of came up off the back of that and was further refined with AI was to basically build out this whole fictional family of the one real guy, Albert. And then all these characters, if you go to the next, they all have their own unique story, and they sort of own a content vertical. So every time we're talking about floor plans or the property, it's under Matthew, who was an architect in the 1880s. Anytime we're talking about trail guides and things like that, it's under Joseph, one of the first national park rangers. These people are fake, just made up in this fictional story. But if you go to the next, what AI helped me do on this brand is not only pull their stories together, but start to figure out for every character, there's an entirely different image treatment and style, framing style. Go to the next. Same thing on their graphic elements and graphic style, so that when that content pillar comes through, it's in their era and in their style. Go to the next. And one of the big genesis, or where this idea came from for me, is I started to remember when I was a kid in elementary school, we had these projects where we had to gather like our family keepsake boxes and sort of put them into a fake trunk made out of a shoebox. My sister and I like laid everything out on the table, on the pool table, and like grouped it by family member. And I had this idea of like a tactile, like flat lay on the website where you would click into one of these family members' piles and it would expand and show their story and all their content. That pre-AI, to get that out of my head, to get everything I showed you before, all the different family members, the different graphic styles, image treatment, would not have been remotely possible. And also to get to this mock-up, which was done in Revue, I believe, to communicate to my web designer, like how to pull this through, how this was gonna make sense in the website concept. And then I took it forward into Lovable and just made a clickable prototype, especially because on this one, the function was so important. You click on the stack, this slide out comes from the right. This was all done working between ChatGPT and Lovable, ChatGPT and Revue, generating the prompts in ChatGPT. And I'll get a little bit more into the technicality of that and like how to do that in a second. And then I just talked to my developer today. We're finishing up the development of the website. This is where it ended up today. This is like the full design version of it. Same idea, you got the flat lay, you got the family member pop-up. You go to the next. And I was able to produce over 200 custom assets. Everything that you see here was done with AI. So images, little like ephemera, so like notebook, all tied to these characters and these stories. And I bring up this and I go into all that detail, not because you guys are doing hotels or family members and all these stories. I'm sure none of you are. But what I realized why I was able to produce those 200 assets and why I was able to make it so far down the road with this is because all of that conversation, that was all done in a day. It was like a 12-hour day. And it was all in the same, at that time I was using Claude. I used ChatGPT more. It was in that chat. And so I didn't go in there with like, hey, my brand's deal page, make me this social asset. It had everything down to like the most human level of understanding of context, of inspiration, of themes. And I started to figure that that was the reason why that I wouldn't even, and I still don't, read the prompts that ChatGPT or Claude will give me before I put them into Midjourney or Revue. I say, hey, this is the idea. Are we on the same page? Okay. Help me make this. I'm going to make it in Midjourney. Give me a Midjourney prompt, copy it, paste it. Don't even read it. Don't even look at it. But if you do look at it, you'll notice like certain keywords and certain things that come through that you're not telling it to bring in. I think that's probably the most important thing I realized is that if you go to the next, ChatGPT is the hub. It's your creative partner. You need to establish that creative guideline, that creative base, and have it in that system, either in the chat or I'll show you at the end how to like upload it into a project or a custom GPT. And then you get into the prompting and the tools. And that's why I said at that point, the tool you use, the prompt it writes, doesn't really matter. I mean, it does, but if you're like me, you're not even reading them. I'll take prompts in one go. I'll say, okay, this is the thing we want to make, or usually we've arrived at that idea together. So weird to say like we, but like we've arrived there together. I'm like, okay, give me Revue, Midjourney, Visual Electric prompts in a row. And then go to different tabs and rip it out and like iterate in those tabs and come back, give it feedback. But that's the workflow I go through. Now we're going to talk about like how to get to that creative base and pull that out of you and your company about your brand. Because I'm sure you guys have a brand guideline. There's a couple people though that responded saying they're like looking at starting new brands. This will be particularly relevant. This may seem irrelevant to you if you already have like a built-out brand guidelines, though I would highly recommend to go through the process I'm going to walk through because these brand guidelines were not written for this purpose. And while they may go into things like typography, color, logo marks, even some thematic things, all the brand guidelines that I've ever seen, they're not in human language like you would talk to your creative partner. They're not as in-depth. They don't have a lot about your offering, your company, the problems and solutions you solve. Having all that in that base that you're working with ChatGPT, I've found to be the most critical thing. And you'll see it come through when it's generating assets and coming up with copy for you because, like it knows your company. And I think that would be the biggest thing that I would say is to go through this process and make this foundation for yourself. If you go to the next. This looks like, I also said in the right format. So like I said, human language. I have like a certain sections that I like to have in there, which I'll walk through, getting it into a markdown format, and then having that uploaded into like a ChatGPT custom project or a custom GPT. From there, it can become your art director, generate your prompts very quickly. So what do I include in this and how do we go about doing it? Brand foundation is core offering, brand ethos. Creative direction is like brand themes. Art direction is content pillars and brand formats for that content. And I'll explain the importance of that in a second. Might seem a little out of place. And then visual identity, the classic stuff. And then importantly at the end, your AI library, as I call it. So translating that like directly into usable like keywords and things that the AI can use going forward. And I think I'll send this around after. So, all right, first step, brand foundation, context dump. If you have a brand guideline, put it in there. But what I like to do is just voice, I'm always dictating. And then these are the types of questions I like to answer when I'm doing core offering and brand ethos. Core offering is pretty straightforward. Brand ethos is more, emotional. Some of the questions I like most is like, what do we believe about this space that most competitors don't? What customers think of us? What emotion should they feel? Are you the trusted stalwart or the innovator disruptor? And I've been shocked at how ChatGPT is able to pull this through in little ways on color decisions, texture decisions. Like it really understands things like a human. So you want to go to that level of depth with it. And the output of this will basically be like a paragraph for core offering and brand ethos. And throughout this whole process, I don't really show it here, but I'll have ChatGPT open in one tab and then a Google Doc in the other. And I'm just, once I align and land on the final like core offering paragraphs, and these are shortened a little bit. Go to the next. Like I'll usually go in a little bit more on solutions and features. I'll put it over to the Google Doc so I then have that, and that's what you turn into Markdown to put back into a GPT in the future. So I'm going back and forth. So these are core offering. Go to the next. Brand ethos is shorter, more straightforward. And go to the next slide. All right, so creative direction. Somebody said to me like they're not that creative. And I think I mentioned before, I wasn't trained in like a creative medium. I did come from a family of creatives, like everybody in my family, creative director, agency owner, et cetera. So I had a sense, but this is the framework that I use that I think is pretty, anybody could do it to really like box in and define their creative direction, their themes, if that's what they want to do. And then I'll talk about where AI and different tools come at different parts of the process. So my biggest thing with creative is like if you go in to create a brand or even like an individual asset, you have a whole world of infinite possibilities, and that may seem great, but especially like today, you're on Instagram all day, you're on Pinterest. If you're like me, I see like a cool carousel or an ad, I'm saving them all the time. I never used to do anything with them. They'd sit in my saved, and you have all this inspiration that's actually not good. And what I've found is like creative constraints are so important. So how do you do that? I call it the frame. I call this framework. Go to the next. So for me, and I think this does apply to operating businesses, but it's a little specific here to hotels. I think about this where the frame is made up of four corners. You have to build that wood frame in order to create the canvas that you're then going to paint your brand on. How do you build that frame? Experience, market, economics, and culture. Those zoom out and become the corners of that frame. And what I call this is territory research. So using these as like the lenses to go deeper into the subject related to your brand. So like for hotels, it's a little bit easier for me to explain, but maybe you could apply it to an operating company just as easily. But like for experience, what people do while using your product, what they feel, what the vibe is. Market is just your competitors, their product, their website, their social. Economics is really like on your pricing tier and segment, what does their stuff look like? And then beyond your industry and category, but the idea of pricing tier, where you want to land, looking at, by the way, this is all from a visual sense. So pulling in images, taking screenshots of all these things and all these pillars. Culture is like history, longstanding beliefs and themes, current trends, going on social, looking at trending TikToks in your area, et cetera. I screenshot all this stuff. Go to the next. I have ChatGPT. I do a deep research on the industry market category, basically on just explain the goal, and it pretty much knows what to do. It is great at just giving, once you have a little bit of a base built with the core offering and brand ethos, giving you comps and direct links to their websites and their Instagram to go explore, writing little reports on them. Gathering these things then from Instagram, Pinterest, and the web, pulling them into Figma. and kind of just arranging things and starting to pull the things together that I think are making sense. Go to the next. And then what I'm doing, once I have like a defined mood board for the brand or the project or whatever I'm doing, I'm screenshotting it, taking it back to ChatGPT and talking to it specifically, trying to find what I call takeaways. And these are things I like to look for, commonalities and patterns, things that stand out, whether that's colors, typefaces. If you go look at all the top tier, price tier comps in your market, they're all using serif. That means something. Things like that. And ChatGPT is great at reviewing the screenshots with you and spotting these things. And if you go to the next, what you then need to do with these is sort of define them out into what could become your themes. And what I found ChatGPT to be great at is like a thought partner in helping you like identify, define, and label things that you wouldn't know how to articulate, such as like, hey, I like these images, like look the same, I like this style, like what is this? It's like, oh, that's this style of film grain, or that's this warmth, or this saturation. And we'll get a little bit more into the technical details, but this may seem like kind of big picture and a lot if you're not, a creative in a traditional sense, but I rely on ChatGPT. I use it to review all those things with me at every step of the process. And then getting to the end with like a creative direction paragraph that sort of sums up what you're about and how that's going to come through in a creative sense, summing up your themes, and then listing your themes out. So this is a good example. This is a friend that I worked with. He's doing this hotel. He went to Japan, he got all inspired, and he came back and he's putting up cabins on a piece of land in Georgia. And he came to me, and this is what he had for like his brand. If you go to the next, we did this exercise together, and some of the takeaways that we came to in going through this process was this focus on like dictionary, like typeface and graphical layouts, and then a focus on moving away from Japanese art as the base and tying it to Georgia and the things that are present, but presenting it in a Japanese style. All those things were either ChatGPT came up with them or like helped us get there. So the prompt that I was giving it at the time was like, hey, he's coming back from Japan, he's just doing this Japanese style thing here. I think you want to lean away from like cultural appropriation. Like, how can we make this feel more rooted and not feel like we're just ripping Japan off and putting it in the mountains of Georgia? And that was the idea that it started to come to of, okay, trees are a big thing there. He has this mountain range, which will come back in a second. Let's put that forth in this Sumi-E ink style, which again, like I would have never known that term, but that's where ChatGPT is coming in to help identify, label, and define. And then these were the themes that we came up with, all articulated and worded from ChatGPT. You go to the next. This is one that like really impressed me. So this is my brand deal page, and I've been working on it for a long time, never really did a branding exercise. Always just wanted to do this like nostalgic theme just because I thought it would do well on social and it felt good to me. But what I could never figure out, because I'm trying to replace PDFs, which is like the old way of doing things, how it made sense that the new way was old and was presented in this older aesthetic. And I just was explaining that to ChatGPT like I'm explaining it to you all right now. I was pulling together the images I liked. And what it came up with was this idea where the creative direction is the contrast. So we are going to be contrasting in every single moment in our creative, old versus new. Deal page taking the position of new, but that way we can own and utilize that older aesthetic as well, take advantage of the nostalgia and the effect it has on social. So just examples of like the old and new, like running multiple different ad campaigns. Whenever we're talking about like the old way, the problem, the pain, it's in this older aesthetic. It helped me define everything from typeface to image treatment, texture, etc. And then in the new world, it's always presented like this. And that was when I was like, holy shit. I don't know if that clicks for you guys, but for me, after like, I've always thought about this nostalgic angle. I've worked on this brand for a long time. That was the first time I'm like, okay, that makes sense. And that feels really good to me. And not only that, it helped me like systematically spread this out and typify like how this was going to work at every touch. I didn't write any of this. This was all generated by ChatGPT, which then helps inform it in every piece of creative we produce going forward. But when I do bring in the creatives for that last 20%, it's also defined there as well. Now, art direction, and this is where a little bit more of the AI in the like prompting and like Midjourney sense starts to come through. Once you have, go back actually. Once you have that creative base and your themes defined in this Google Doc or in the chat that you're working out of, and ChatGPT saves those chats, what I like to do next is, in order to test, before getting to visual identity, I like to lay out the formats in which it's going to be implemented, the use cases, the mockups, because I don't like deciding on fonts and color or anything until I can see it like implemented across many different versions and touch points. So I actually do that first, and what I do is I have ChatGPT help me come up with content pillars. And the way I do that is I think about what themes and topics we have available for us to talk about, and specifically trying to go outside what's obvious. Like Deal Page could obviously talk about web page pitch decks, but what else is available to us that also aligns with what people are actually interested in on social? So one thing is just like profiling deals. Real estate developers love just looking at a deal. What are the numbers? Is it working? Is it not? Okay, that is a content pillar for us. What is the best format for that? ChatGPT, what do you think? Do you have ideas? Give me Pinterest search terms for carousels that you think would like look good to present this type of information. Decide on the format, carousel, reel, image post. Pull those into Figma. So I'll go grab examples because ChatGPT will either give me Instagram links, Pinterest search terms, brands to go look at. Once I find some examples of each, I'll pull that into Figma. Go to the next. These are some examples of content pillars. So like for Ukiyo, that Japanese hotel, cultural education, spaces and structures, sacred rituals, and through the eyes of like repositioning guest UGC. And for each of those, we found these formats. So like graphic carousel, single asset floor plans in that style, in this style. All of these were Pinterest prompts that came from ChatGPT. Sacred rituals presented as reels with this type of titling, and then found this example on Auberge, which is a competitor, for how they reposition their UGC, and this through the eyes of idea. And then what I'm doing is I'm having ChatGPT give me typeface color options and image treatment texture options that I'll then pass through and implement on these example like formatted posts, usually in Figma or with Midjourney, Revue, or Visual Electric. I'm testing really rapidly to boil it down to then picking the final typeface color set and then into logo, which I think I go into next. So like for color, I'll say, hey, based off like everything you know about this brand, everything we've just gone through, give me like a broad color palette. Give me a prompt to go make a broad color palette in Midjourney, 30 colors. I'll get that, I'll pull that into Figma. Usually I just make a couple squares in Figma and I'll start eyedropping the different colors and kind of moving them around and playing with them until I refine that down to like the final set of colors that I'm liking, and usually testing it through in those mockups. Go to the next. Same thing with type. Give me 3 sets of header, subheader, body, accent. Go to the next. Logo, give me like comp brand links that I can go look at, screenshot the logos, pull them into Figma, refine it down to my favorites, take a screenshot, give it back, give me a prompt for logo, go over to Midjourney, Revue, all 3. I'm usually like putting them through all 3. Go to the next. I'll prompt it out a bunch. I'll take them back into Figma. There's a tool in Figma called Image Tracer. It just vectorizes the logo. I wasn't liking this one that much. I put it next to my typefaces. So actually what I did, go to the next. I jumped to layout and graphic because that's like kind of what defines your website, your style. That's where the logo is going to be. Let's figure that out first. We kind of found this like maple tree tag because this concept's in Vermont. I focused on that, got a bunch of Pinterest terms from ChatGPT, screenshotted this, went back to the logo. Go next. It gave me a new set of prompts, very different direction on the logo, more aligned with that like basically bordered idea of those tree tags. I like this one better. Go to the next. Got into image treatment, same thing, Pinterest search terms, bring it into Figma, start putting the vectorized logo over the top just to see how things are feeling. Same thing with text. Go to the next. Refine that down to the stuff that feels good, give it back to ChatGPT, have it like typify and define out what this is, what this direction is. And what I mean by that is like type treatment, explaining how that's going to look, ink bleed, I actually can't read this that well, monospace, whatever these terms are, typography, getting into the kerning, color system and usage, image treatment, getting into the image style, that is all then retained in that creative base. And then this is where you get to that AI library. So this is for layout and graphics, image style. I worked with ChatGPT for a long time to figure out like parse it down because you can only put so many characters in the custom GPT and projects to like the most important stuff, but things like keywords that you can see here. And again, ChatGPT deeper knows all these tools. It knows the internet. Like, this is the brand. We just worked through it together. Give me those keywords that we can keep in our base that then you or any other AI or creative can use to be a part of those prompts that we're creating. That way, 35mm film texture becomes a consistent part of all the assets that we're creating. We get the brand consistency that we want. Here are some examples in, like, I guess, workflows and prompts. So like for this one, Pinterest examples, idea was like a carousel. I'll take that into Midjourney. Midjourney has a feature called retexture. And I'll ask ChatGPT for a retexture prompt. It's on the left side, it says edit, click there, and you put in an image and you write. It's a different type of prompting, but it basically took like a pretty exact example, retextured it like that, and like I said, the last 20%, this gets pulled back into Figma. My designer, this was still at the early mock-up stage, just threw in some text and some copy just to see how it was looking, see how it was feeling. Go to the next. This is the floor plan for the wellness studio at this Georgia concept. This is the Sumi-e Japanese style like sketchwork that we found. Prompt for retexture with the image reference. That goes into Midjourney, that's what came out. That comes back into Figma, vectorize it with image tracer, put it in a Figma frame with like a paper background, and that's that. Go next. This is one of my favorites. There's this mountain range that you can see from the property, and Brian, this guy I was working with on this, was like, I really want this to like be a part of this. I don't know how we work it in. So mountain range, remove background, write prompt, retexture in Midjourney with image reference of that style graphic. It spits out this like mountain range paint stroke that's now the social icon. Go next. Same thing, so on image treatments, this is pretty cool. These are all the base images, 2 renderings and then an image of that mountain range. These are the reference styles that ChatGPT helped us find, and these are those retextured images down here, applying those styles based off of, if you were to read those prompts, because I did read these ones, it's things like the greenish and blue hue with the warm like gold light, things about the shadowing coming in through the windows. That's all what gets captured by ChatGPT. I never called that out to it. That's what's retained in the base and then what's put forth in all the prompts going forward. And then that's just a little close up. And again, you know, it's not perfect. Does it look like AI? I think one of the benefits and one thing I like to do is like make the brand steer towards like film grain, something that's gonna like disrupt the AI-ness. That makes it a little bit harder to see. And you know, putting this on the website behind a darker overlay, you know, there's things you can do to hide it a little bit more. So, like I said, the goal is to get to this like creative base that you can then keep like as a file for yourself, continuously updating. And then I think the easiest way is just putting it into a ChatGPT project. I don't know the difference. How many of you guys are familiar with projects in ChatGPT? What about the custom GPTs? So I don't think they're that different. The one difference though is custom GPTs, you can share a link to like external people, graphic designer, whoever. And now we'll get to that in a second. I like projects better because I've just tested the two. I feel like it's better. You know, that's just subjective though.
Can I ask a question about projects? Or is this not a question time yet?
No, I guess you can ask.
Sorry.
No worries.
When you're doing all this, like when you're talking about projects, like how much of this is in one project for you versus like the second and third, and are you like, what are you moving into the next project?
Well, I'll just do a chat. I don't do it in a, like if it's a new brand, it'll just be a normal chat, and I'll be putting everything in that Google Doc.
Yep.
And the Google Doc is formatted like H1, H2, H3, bullet points, like you're telling ChatGPT what it's gonna be the output for, so it does the markdown, and like the italics and stuff matter, I guess. And then when it's done, then I'll start a project, I'll name it after the brand, and I'll put a short instructions paragraph in the project instructions. And again, ChatGPT, write the instructions for this. And it references the different parts of your creative base. And then you put the creative base thing in the knowledge docs. And then I'll also add there like brand guidelines if you have them. If certain stuff starts to come up for a brand, like very particular outputs or things, I won't put it in that creative base. I'll just have a separate knowledge doc. And then really I'm not making new projects that much. Yeah.
Also a question. So one for custom GPTs, correct me if I'm wrong, but it doesn't seem like you have transparency to what model it's using.
Yeah, you can't, that's true too, yeah.
And then on the projects, are you switching between models throughout your prompting?
I'm starting to more and more. When I'm like figuring shit out, I like to use O3 Pro. It takes a long time though. It's not as long as a deep research, but every response, even like the shortest, like, hey, change this in the prompt. So I don't use it when I'm rapid prompting, but when you're going through this process, I'd recommend O3 Pro. 4.5 is really good for writing. And then I'll get to some of the other tools. What is this one? Oh, to do a website, I haven't found a great like end-to-end solution on a website, and I'm pretty like good in Figma. So what I'll do, or you know, a designer can do, is comp website links. I'll find one I like. This is Aman Giri. Pull into Figma using HTML to design, and then in Figma just messing around, swapping out images, and then that becomes, you can do it for a couple sites and kind of pull sections together, and then that becomes what you hand off to a web designer. Or Lovable. But you can't get as like designy and aesthetic in Lovable, but for function and layout, navigation, usually I'll do this, then do Lovable as a pairing. It's not as styled, but it really shows like how things flow together. And again, ChatGPT is giving me every prompt, and I'll screenshot Lovable and be like, hey, I don't like that this thing is here. Just, you know, give me the prompt to go tell it what to do.
Do you never use the Lovable chat, or do you like always check?
I don't know how much it matters, but I feel like all that context and everything matters. So I like you. ChatGPT is like my guy. We're going back and forth. Maybe it doesn't matter that much, but no, I'm just like prompting straight back in there. Is that the end?
I think so.
Let's see, yeah, that is.
So quickly, and then questions, some thoughts. I was talking to somebody I work with on this last night. If I were to break it down to the best, like the tools and what they do, ChatGPT is your creative partner. It's like an employee. That's the hub. That's where you create the creative base and where you keep it. And it's generating the prompts with you. It's your thought partner. Almost everything I do, I'm like, oh, I want to do a new carousel post for my personal brand. Give me some Pinterest prompts. Like, let me go find some stuff, screenshot the stuff I like, and iterate off that and work towards a prompt that will either, I'm not making the final text versions in AI. I haven't found anything that's like that controllable, but like getting the layout scheme down. I'll get through that, put it into Figma, and then I have my designers go in and like actually finish it out. That's ChatGPT. The best image gen is Midjourney. There's a couple features that are very important, and I didn't get it. If you notice, like the slides in this deck like got less and less design. That's because I was designing until like right before you guys got here, and I didn't get a chance to show this. But in Midjourney, they have a personalization feature. And you have to do this weird Tinder thing where you like or dislike 200 images in order to like unlock it. But then under personalization, which is a big P in the top right corner, you can go to that and make mood boards. So actually, if you go, yeah, go back like quite a bit.
To the mood boards.
I'll tell you when. Keep going back, sorry. Well, this whole like sketch, all the shit with the circles and the triangles and square, that was all ChatGPT. I told you I have, for my brand, I have these like 2 line art drawings. I'm like, okay, I want to like do something with that. So again, worked with ChatGPT, got it to give me the prompts to like go and make these sketch things in Midjourney, and it was great at making like the format, but not getting the style. So what I did is I went to Sequoia. I think it's Sequoia. They have great like hand-drawn sketches and stuff. I took a screenshot of a bunch of those, laid that into the Midjourney personalization mood board, named it HC Sketch, human capital sketch. And then when ChatGPT would write the prompt to be like, okay, give me this graphic line art square, it would be pulling from that like mood board, and it would get the stylization like much better. That's one of the most powerful features, I think, with Midjourney if you're making like iconography, highly treated images and things like that. The edit and retexture is really big too. That's just for like applying those types of treatments and like coloring to images. And then a new model that I just became aware of is Visual Electric, which I've just started to play with, but I think it might overtake everything. Not the least of which because it has an unlimited canvas like Figma. So right now I'm constantly going back and forth between Figma and Midjourney. Now it can all kind of happen within Visual Electric. And Visual Electric has all the same retexture and edit. It doesn't have the personalization as much as Midjourney, but from what I've seen for non-tech stuff, Visual Electric has quickly become like one of the best. This was literally 2 days ago. So very new. And then I still like using Revue. It's very hard to control, but it can often, if somebody said in our Slacks, like coming up with slide decks, maybe not finished product, but like how to lay stuff out, like Revue is the best for that, in my opinion. Just giving it a concept like, hey, this is what I want to communicate. Again, ChatGPT will do all this for you, but it'll give you a bunch of variations of like, oh, put the header here or down below, or what's something more abstract. But again, you can see how it's so important if ChatGPT is giving you that, it's retaining your like brand base. So that's why I honed in on that for this conversation. That's it. Questions?
Thanks for this, it's really interesting. Like, start to finish, right? Like, so something that you'd be handing off to a web developer or handing off to a designer. How long would you say that process takes you?
Including making this like creative base.
Sure, because I think it was one of the questions that you identified at the top, where it was like, this is all really awesome and gets my mind going of like how to better integrate it into the process. But at a certain point, I'm all like, wait, at what point is this worth me spending $20,000 with a design firm, right? Versus me trying to,
So I think you can get through the creative base in like 2 hours.
Okay.
And then that's your base for like going forward. And you kind of need to have like an idea of what to do. And I'll send this around. This kind of lays it out. I generally like just figured out what to ask just based off like what I did on brands in the past. But like Brian, who I worked with on this, he did all the like mood boarding and stuff. And then we'd like get on a call and just look at it together. But it took him like 2 hours to get through this whole process of the brand base. And then on something like a website, like I did the first mock-up with the slide outs and stuff for Petty Ranch Inn. That must have been like 2 hours. And it was just prompting back and forth, and it was annoying. But it cut my dev cost probably several $1,000s. Just that early discovery and like that lo-fi wireframing that takes up the first part and getting on the same page. I was on that page already, handed it to the designer. He brought it to high fidelity. I think it's not like days though. Yeah, especially if you have like your base done. Any other?
First of all, thank you. It was super impressive. Really appreciate putting that together.
Thanks.
I have 2 questions. One is actually about the presentation because I enjoyed it. How much of the presentation did you make with AI, like the actual slides and whatnot? Because I was like, wow, this is a really nice looking slide deck.
It's funny, like this is not good at all for me. If you go back, like I said, in the beginning, it's not like it's that great, but like at the end, it's just like shit laid out randomly. I spent way more time at the beginning of it. So the whole like sketch thing with the squares and all that shit, I made another presentation recently, like kind of defining my process, which is a little different because like interior design is worked in. Maybe I could send that. I'm happy. I'll send a bunch of shit around after, but I think people ask about slide decks a lot. That's a good example. And I can even send like what Revue gave me to come up with the layouts that I came, and I think that deck way better than this for sure. But that was like one of my better decks in Revue. Like every slide I was like, oh, how should I do this? And then the letters are all like totally like messed up and like kind of foreign looking, but they at least show like how to, where to put stuff. This one, I've had all these assets like floating around and stuff from other presentations. So no, I was just dragging stuff together in Figma for the most part, I think. A lot of the assets were made with AI though, yeah.
Yeah, like really nice. Maybe more at the beginning, but also like design simple things, but great at the beginning. The other question is like really simple is, I don't Claude, I just gotta know like why ChatGPT did not, why did you stop using Claude?
I was a Claude guy like forever. I don't know, I just think it's better. And I think it has projects. I don't know, I go through phases, I guess. Yeah. But I was gonna say, AI like outlined this, everything I write that's over like 4 paragraphs now, it's kind of bad to admit. Everything's voice note, transcribe into AI, write it. So like outlining this, I was at Bar Pisanello the other night, just sitting there like gabbing away for 45 minutes about my process, and like it helped me, structure the outline. So I use it for that for sure. Anything else?
I have a question
So I think I imagine within this room, there's kind of a spectrum of people who like totally own creative start to finish in their company and then like maybe fully outsource.
Mm-hmm.
What is one, maybe like if we take anything away from this, one kind of like experiment or actionable thing that like anyone here, regardless of, you know, how involved you are currently with the creative process could do?
And this is that end point that I was going to bring up. Like, I've cut my cost and my time substantially on my brand and specifically on production. I was telling someone in the back, like the illustrations for a hotel, we'll do like 35 custom illustrations. You know, you go into the hotel room, there's all that paperwork and the menu and like on the website, that takes a long time. Illustrators, good ones also aren't cheap. Pretty much like replaced illustrators now. And one of them is like a good friend of mine and like I feel bad about it, but it is what it is. Where was I going? There was a point to that. Oh, that's great. Costs are down, but there's nobody else who knows how to like do that for me. So now I'm the illustrator, which is like, to your point. And I think that is like one of the key problems here. I will say I hired this guy who's been like tutoring me. He was a friend of a friend, and he's not like an AI researcher or anything. He's a mechanical engineer he went to Michigan. And he's just like into it way more than I am even. And he's helped me a lot, like figure this stuff out. And a couple people asked about like training their team on this. I wouldn't feel like I could, you know, past what I just showed you, this is the extent of like distilling my knowledge. So if this is not super clear on like the technical side, then I'm assuming I probably couldn't like train a team or something, but like somebody like that, I think there's gonna be more of a market for like technical. The problem with him though is he's not like super creative, but if you're trying to figure out the tech side, I really recommend this guy. I can like give his email. He's just like a solo, he charges hourly. He's like tutoring people basically. As far as like a takeaway, I mean, I think the simple implementation is getting even like a simplified brand base into a project for you to use. If you're whether it's your personal brand or your company, even just focusing on that core offering and brand ethos. And just the first time I ever did this, I didn't have those questions listed out. I just talked into my microphone for 45 minutes about Deal Page. This is what it is, this is what I want it to be, this is the vibe, these are the people I sell to, like rambling on. And then that got me down the road of like picking colors and things. But I think even if you could get to like, this is what the company is, problem, solutions, features, this is like the vibe, this is what we stand for, this is like what I feel about it. And having that in this doc that's in a project and just doing the prompting you're all probably trying now out of that will add a layer of like contextual understanding that down to like the blue that it prompts the Midjourney to do and that's coming from like a base of something now. I think that's the best step one. I don't think you need to get to like the image treatment and all that as much.
Cool. That's super cool. Thank you. Anyone else?
One more question. I've actually never heard of Revue before. Is that just like a Midjourney?
No, it's like another website. I don't know how they're all connected, but it's good. I don't know how to describe it. It's worse. You can't do the personalization, none of that other shit. There's just the text box and like produce. You can kind of like remix stuff, but yeah.
For like image generation?
Yeah, it's good for like theoretic, like I said, kind of layouts and stuff. I'll send that slide deck and the Revue stuff around. Also, I want to do like more of these, like a series. So if you guys like this, there's definitely more depth of technicality that I could get into, but it would have to be like an example, like walkthrough. I can't like come up with it. And I just simply couldn't like pull all that together in the broadest sense. But like, for example, personal brand's big for me. I just came up the other day, I have these story highlights, and I'm like, oh, what's something interesting I could do for the icon? And I was like, this paint stroke plus. Then I'm like, oh, okay, each of these story highlights is like about my story. I'm like, what if that paint stroke plus like spun as an animation and then turned into a bike, and then the story highlights started? And I made that with like ChatGPT, Midjourney, and Sora, and like stuff like that of showing like how I went from idea to images to video output. Focusing it in on maybe like like personal brand, I'd love to do that. And I think specific examples would be easier. So.
I would love to just like watch
watch. You know, like when you were talking, like I have two docs open, I'm bouncing here, I'm bouncing, like I'm trying to visualize, and I'm like actually seeing would be.
I've been told that it's helpful, like Brian, this guy. I'm down, whatever. Monthly series, we'll see. Thanks for listening. This was really fun for me.
I have a last one. Yourself, when you're like ChatGPT, you're like away. Sometimes, like you start jumping some things and then you go to move forward and like you're building your brand or you're building your website or you're building your report. Like it creates a mess. So
It's really like Chrome, ChatGPT. Like I'll get into like a session, the first thing I'll do, open ChatGPT, open Midjourney, open Revue, Visual Electric. Figma is in the next like screen over, and then that's it. That's like the, it's a lot, but yeah, and then I'm just going back and forth, yeah.
basically close everything and you just open the floor.
Yeah, that's it. And there's,
Give yourself like a time block, like I know I need to be here for 3 hours or 2 hours, so I'm just gonna like jam and like no distractions. Like, do you give yourself a good solid amount of time?
yeah, for sure. But this is like my whole job, really. If I don't have like a new project spinning up, like my whole day is like working on one of these. But yeah, I mean, it ends up, I get so like into it. There's like other little things and stuff. Like I mentioned, there's this app, Remove Background, that's super easy. You drop, I'm sure there's other ways to do it, but like to get rid of the background of an image, which makes it way easier for Midjourney to retexture. Like stuff like that, there's more of that stuff that I know. Things about downloading images and organizing them and uploading them.
You asked for prompts for Pinterest. What was like obviously just give you search terms, but like just because it knows your brand, knows what you're looking for, you say, hey, I'd love to look for examples of a website. Can you give me a search term? Is that what you do?
Website, I have it give me comp brands, like just websites. And like the other day, I'm looking at a project in Hudson Valley. It's like a cabin thing. And I'm like, give me some comp cabin brands, but not like glamping and lame, like something cool. There's one from Tasmania, Scotland, like all over the world, stuff I would have never found. And like pretty on brand, like aesthetically as well. Websites, I do links. Pinterest is like social posts or just like image style treatment, like the grain, the saturation, same thing with like graphics and carousels. And it's crazy, like I don't know, like my art director knows way more like terminology and things, and I'll get these Pinterest search terms. I'm like, what the hell is that? Whatever, put it into Pinterest. And then I see, oh, I know that. Like I've seen, I would recognize that like image style or whatever it is. It knows all the terminology and it knows how to like, okay, your brand is this. This is the Pinterest search term.
I'm looking for good inspiration for social posts and just give you a search term. Just give you something.
And it will give you brand Instagram links too.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and again, ones I've never heard of, which is super helpful.
Sorry, this is a more boring question. Amazing presentation, but who owns the copyright to the creative? So when you're doing it for hospitality partners, do you own it? Does AI own it?
I have no idea. These are largely, half my projects are like mine, and then half are like clients. And the only one that I've done for a client with AI is this Petty Ranch Inn one. And that has recently come up where I'm like, but I know for sure you can't use Pinterest images, so I'm like, it has to be better than that. But as of now, I don't know the legality of that.
Really nuanced answer that is like approaching a pretty like gray area of things. The party line has been that since the material has no human author, there can be no owner, because under copyright law, generally speaking, it needs to be human authorship, right? But we are fastly approaching some really interesting legal battles over like both the outputs and the inputs, which have been going on for quite a long time. The problem is that most of the media companies that were like fighting these battles are acquiescing and now just like taking, multi-million-dollar contracts from OpenAI and dropping their lawsuits. So I don't know, it's a weird area. We're venturing into strange territory, and I think it's going to evolve a lot. I think you actually, over time, you can see like companies emerge that will have like tokenization of media generated from like a ChatGPT, so that like people actually know where that's coming from. But it's a really good question and like not a really clear answer. But I think the risk is low, net of like integrating your work into stuff, because it's really hard to prove where that came from. But it's going to be a really interesting like couple of years to sort that stuff out?
I'm recording this. What are some things, I said I'll send the other deck of mine and the Revue slides that like referenced off of it. Deck was like a common thing that people responded with. Is there anything else?
The artifacts among your projects.
Artifacts.
And you said you included in some, I don't remember what you call them, some files. The reference.
Oh, the brand guidelines.
Yeah.
I like haven't, so I've given this talk to like a couple core groups before. I felt like a little, I'm not sure I'm going to give that out just because that's like the service I offer. But I'm happy on like the deck and the reference stuff. And I can think of other stuff that would be helpful. Yeah. Anything else? Pizza time?
Oh, yeah.
Cool.
Thank you so much, Beth.